Appreciate you all coming this morning. At the end of the semester, always have opportunities for some of our interns to share their projects and a chance to share some of what they've done. I think, have each of you been to another presentation before? This is not the first time. It is the first time, okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes students do projects. We try to find projects one of two types if we can, either something that's right down the student's alley of interest, something that helps prepare them maybe for what they want to do professionally, or sometimes we try and give a student a project, something that can flesh out a little bit some of their experience, something they haven't ever worked on before, so they can have some exposure to something that's brand new. But the culmination of that project is to do a presentation, a professional presentation. Dalton's done a nice job, coat and tie. And that's what we're looking for, a chance to be professional. IT doesn't always require coat and tie, a lot of IT jobs. That's Mrs. Todd and I try to model typical IT professional attire, and this is very common for a lot of IT jobs, but there are times when you're expected to dress up and make a presentation, so this is part of the experience. I know you've all had chances to do presentations in class before, and that's good preparation for this, but this is your big one. So it's a good opportunity to show that you can communicate what you're working on and make it so that not only IT people can understand, but people who aren't IT people can understand. So give your attention to Dalton.
Thank you very much. Well, I guess my name is Dalton Hawkinson, for any that didn't know. Just to kind of add to Dr. Nelson a little bit, as far as the project is concerned, I think I fall under the category of trying to find a place to expose myself to things that I didn't know before. I had a class this past semester, operating systems, where I ran a Linux container, and that was new to me. It was through command line, which I don't do often or at all, and things like that. So when I came to them about this, I wanted to expand myself with something like that. So that's what today will be, and let's get into it. Okay, so my project for this semester was to create two virtual machines, one being a Windows machine and the other a Linux. And on these, I was to run containers on both virtual machines. I chose Docker. I'll get into that in a bit. And then on these containers, I'll run some tasks that have a specific use. So that was the main point of my project. Just real quick, some problems that I ran into pretty early on. When we first talked about it, we were supposed to use a physical server in the computer lab that I was going to put these on. And it turned out that, It turned out that this server wasn't able to, I talked to Jeremy Worcester about it. He's very knowledgeable with things, servers and such like that in the lab. And I talked to him, and we came to the realization that the server that we were going to use it on may not support virtualization, so we didn't think that I'd be able to put these onto the server. So I kind of had to go the route of just putting it on my local machine, just my PC that I had in the lab, which it worked. I got the project done, you know. So, and then another problem that arose was using Docker, which I'll get into a little more in detail in a minute. It runs VirtualBox, which is just a type of virtual machine where you can put virtual machines into it. And on my Windows PC, on my lab, Hyper-V is also another place where you can make virtual machines. And if Hyper-V is enabled on your machine, then it interferes with VirtualBox and Docker won't work correctly. So I had to go through trial and error and figure out that Hyper-V had to be disabled before I was even able to really start with the project. And that's what that third point is talking about as well. But getting into it, what is Docker? Docker is a tool designed to make it easier to create, deploy, and run applications by using containers. These containers let you run applications. They let you execute applications inside of them. A Docker is basically a virtual machine in and above itself. It will run images, and then in those images it will run containers which hold applications, and each application runs one application, or each container runs one application. You can have multiple containers inside of an image, but as I said before, my goal was to make 2 virtual machines with at least 2 containers in each of them. So the first thing I had to do was, well, figure out which kind of container I wanted to use, and when I chose Docker, I had to go about this, and the best way to do it was Docker Toolbox. And Docker Toolbox, as you can see over here on the picture on the right, when you download it, it installs the virtual box, it installs Kitematic, and also the Docker Quick Start Terminal, which is basically just a command prompt for Docker. It's its own little terminal that you can run through it. So that was the next step that I had to take. And then, as I mentioned just a second ago, the Docker Quick Start Terminal. It's similar to Windows PowerShell, if you're familiar with that. It's just a command prompt to be able to run applications through and stuff like that. The first time you open this, it will actually create a virtual machine in VirtualBox, which is where I got stuck with the problem with Hyper-V, because it would say error, it's interfering, and I had to figure out that error message and stuff like that. So once Hyper-V is disabled, as soon as you open this Docker Quick Start Terminal for the first time, it will create that virtual machine inside of VirtualBox. And it will give it the name of default, which you can change, but I left it as default just to show that that is indeed the one that downloaded when I started it. And this is the screen that pops up whenever you are, I'm sorry if maybe the lights maybe make it a little hard to see, but this is what it looks like once you open it up for the first time. This is basically the main screen because it's all command line. There's no pretty graphics or anything like that to click on. It's all command line like this. So this is basically the main screen of it, and this is where you'll start pulling your images and making your containers, which I'll get into a bit more in a second. One thing you have to do is make sure that the virtual machine connects to either your server or, in my case, my local machine that I was running it on. There are multiple ways to do that. There's a Docker run hello world, and hello world, for any that doesn't know, is basically just the most simple type of project or anything. If you're doing programming, you're always doing hello world. It's just super easy. And there's a place called Docker Hub on the internet. It holds images for you to install, and the hello world is just one that you can practice on and make sure that your virtual machine can connect to the Docker Hub and be able to pull images from. Another way that you can check this is the Docker will give you a IP address when you boot up the machine, and you can use this machine and ping it on your command prompt on your local machine to make sure that it connects, and I'll get into the IP in a second as well. So this is what I was talking about. If you can see here, when it starts up, this is the main screen, and it'll give you an IP, it assigned one for you. And over here, you can see that this is the command prompt on my local machine, and I use the ping command with that given IP. And as you can see, it does talk to the virtual machine, and they are able to connect, which means whatever runs on that virtual machine, I can pull stuff off of Docker Hub, and I can be able to have that connectivity between the two, which is necessary. And this is the hello world command that the other way I was talking about. You can see I used the Docker run hello world command at the top there, and it doesn't show the installation process because it was already done, but what it'll do is go to the Docker Hub, and it will show it extracting and downloading the files from Docker Hub. And once it does that, it says hello from Docker, just like it says, this message shows that your installation appears to be working correctly. So I was able to connect from that virtual machine to the Docker Hub, and that tells me that I'm able to pull images from that Docker Hub, which I'll be using in just a second. To find the image, I can go back just a second and show you those. The Docker Quick Start terminal is what I was just talking about, and this Kitematic is used. It holds images for you, which is what this screenshot on this page is here. This is what happens when you open Kitematic. Might be a little hard to read, but those are all images that you can pull and use and download onto your Docker instance to use, and you can do multiple. Then I'll get into that. So one of the first things I did was I wanted to practice downloading an image. So I just kind of picked one through that set of images that I just showed from that Kitematic. To do this, you'll just use Docker pull and then the image name, whatever it was. I chose to use Nginx, and as you can see here, I used the Docker pull Nginx, and this does show the installation process. This is what it'll do. It'll extract and download, and once it's completed, to do that. And down here you can see the Docker images command, and that does show that Nginx is running, and it is now on Docker that I can use to put containers in and run some applications. Installing multiple images, as I said, you can use multiple images and download multiple images on a single Docker instance. So you can see the Hello World one that I have on there. There's also Alpine, which is just a Linux, and MySQL, which is just a Microsoft server for stuff like that. And so as you can see, it does hold multiple images, and this can just be if you're doing separate projects on the same Docker instance. You can do just multiple things at once, which wasn't really a big concern for me in this project. I just wanted to practice it and practice downloading and stuff like that. Next comes the containers, which actually holds the applications that you can run for the task, that whatever you want to do. You can check and see what containers you have running using the Docker PS command, which I will show in a second. And then you can also use the Docker PS -A, and that will show all containers even if they're not running at that time, because you can set them to run, you can set them to stop, restart, depending on what applications you want running. So as I said, the Docker PS will show the running ones, the running containers, and the Docker PS -A will show all containers, whether they are running or not. I have a screenshot after this slide, but I want to talk about some of the applications that I set. I noticed that when I shut down my virtual machine and went to restart it, because sometimes I had to restart my computer, whatever the case may be, when I open that virtual machine again, it sets a different IP. The given IP, it gives you a different one, which isn't a huge deal, but you would like it to be constant, I guess, if you're in a big business, or it's not a big deal for me per se. But if that IP is essential to whatever you may be doing, like I said, a bigger business, you may want it to not change like that. And so I found an application that you can run and tweak a little bit, and it will actually give it somewhat of a static IP, so that that IP doesn't change, and it will load up with the same IP every single time. That way it's constant for you. And the other application runs in that Nginx image that I showed earlier that I downloaded, and it will actually reduce server lag and make it quicker for when you pull images. It will make it faster to get to that Docker hub and be able to make those pull requests, so you can get images and whatever else you need to download. You can have that done quicker. And then I just have just a quick screenshot here. As you can see, this is the Docker PS-A here, and so that will show every container, whether they are running or not. It will tell you if they are running. The status on the right there will say exited. That means they're not running at the time. But if it says up to 24 minutes or 8 hours or whatever it may be, that means they're continuing to run. They're still running. This first screenshot actually was on the, because as I said, I made a Linux and a Windows virtual machine. This top one was on the Linux machine that I made. It was the very first virtual machine that I had made, which is why there's so many. I had to practice a little bit, you know. So there's quite a few on there. I had to stop some of the ones that I didn't want to run. And then the one on the bottom here, I just used the Docker PS, so that's just the running ones, but those are the only two that were on there, because that's my Windows machine that I used. That was the second one, where I kind of knew what I was doing a little bit. And I put those applications in those. This is the Nginx one here, to run the Nginx application to reduce the server lag. It's kind of cut off a little bit, but you can see it says daemon of. That's how I know that it's that one. Daemon works with Docker Hub. It's what connects Docker to Docker Hub. So daemon's kind of it's kind of a resource to allow it to talk to each other. And then the Docker entry point, I used the Redis image, which is just another image on Kitematic that I showed. That's the one, that's the application that will kind of set that IP to where it's constant the whole time. I think that's basically it for the presentation. I would have liked to bring in like a physical piece to show, but if I did it on the server, it probably would have been much easier. When I had it on my local machine, it's kind of hard to switch back and forth because they both go through the Docker Quick Start terminal. And if there is an easier way, I didn't see it or haven't found it yet, but I was having to shut my PC completely off and restart it to be able to even get into the other virtual machine via the Quick Start terminal. So I figured that would take up a lot of time to try to show that. I thought that in my opinion, the screenshots were adequate enough to be able to show that what I've done and stuff like that. So that's basically it for the presentation part of it. If there's any questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to answer those. Yes.
Thank you, you did a great job. Can you tell us some examples of application of this kind of technology? What it might look like maybe in an educational institution?
Well, me and Ms. Todd had actually talked about that a little bit. We wanted to put it on that server when we had talked about that and maybe run some applications that could automate some tasks inside the lab. I didn't try that just because I did it on my local machine and I kind of have stuff set up how I wanted it anyway, and I didn't want that to mess anything up. But to answer the question, I think in a place like a school, you mean, like just something like this to run some.
Yeah, what would be a practical application that?
Well, if I would have put it on a server, I feel like we could have done something to run some auto updates or something on like servers or something like that. Just something to kind of reduce a job that a person might manually have to do, and it'd be something just as easy as writing an application, something like that. I don't know how simple the application code would be, but you could do something like that just to make a job easier for somebody in a situation like that. Yes.
I noticed you like downloaded that MySQL,
Yes.
which was a database.
Yeah.
So it would surely run like an application, correct?
That was the image. I didn't, like I said, I didn't mess with that too much. I was just kind of practicing downloading some images. I would assume since it's an image, you'd have to run some sort of like code and applications inside of it. I don't know what it would do just sitting there on its own, just as an image.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I guess you could put some sort of data in there. I didn't try to, just because I was just downloading some images and I didn't end up using it. So I'm not sure exactly what you can do with it on Docker per se.
Isn't that the purpose of Docker, is to provide a place for those applications to run?
Yeah, and the containers is where you would run those applications inside of the images, and that was just an image. So I'm not sure if you could obviously write some containers inside of it, but I didn't get that far inside of MySQL, but I mean, I would say yes, you very well could.
Mhm.
Yes. Did you write any of your own Dockers, or were the ones that you showed just like the ones that you got from the?
Dockers, you mean the containers
Yeah.
that I showed? Not really, like not just from beginning to end from scratch. Some of those I had to maybe tweak a little bit. The one for the IP had a few things that you had to enter your own, like IP information and stuff like that. So I mean, I had to mess with them a little bit, but I didn't just write my own from beginning to end from scratch. I had to get a little bit of help from that.
How long did you work on this project?
In total, I think it was 41, 42 hours. This was just a 1 credit hour class you can take from 1, 2, or 3. 1 being 40, 2 being 80 hours, and 3 being 120. The way it lined up on my schedule, I just needed a 1 credit hour, so this was just a 40 credit hour or 40 hour project. So it wasn't a ton on my plate. It was, but it wasn't. I don't mess with command line much, which is all this was. I haven't really been exposed to Linux much, and to be honest, haven't really I've used virtual machines, but not just to play around on. So really this whole project was just a big learning curve for me, and so while it wasn't a huge project that I had to do, it took about 41, 42 hours, something like that. But I can definitely say I walked away with a lot more knowledge than I knew going into it.
What do you think's the most important thing you learned?
Probably that even if it seems impossible, it's not. There were a couple times I was sitting in my lab and I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna get through this. This is presentation day's coming up. Oh no, what am I gonna do? But I just sat there. It took some long nights. I was in the lab for pretty late last night especially. But it probably just that I can figure it out if I put enough time and work and effort into it, that even if I think I know nothing, I know a little more than I think, and I can figure problems out just from knowledge that I have going into it. I'd say that's probably what I've learned the most about it.
Is this something every computer major should do?
The
This-
presentation?
The project, the presentation,
The project,
or
specifically.
have a project?
Yeah, well, the project specifically, maybe not, just because, everyone has their own interest, but doing a project in a presentation, I think absolutely. I don't wear suits. This was new to me. It's cool to be kind of in charge of like a meeting like this, sort of. I think everyone should be exposed to that at some point, and what better than in college, right before I'm about to go off. The project, if it's interesting to you, maybe show some exposure in things you don't know. So yeah, I would say definitely people should do a project and presentation, just because it gives you that real world application to stuff. Anything else? Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I think we're done. Thank you for coming, for those who did, and have a good day.